They've heard God speak. They've seen God act. Yet they complained. They challenged God's faithfulness and goodness. Before even the crossing of the Red Sea, Moses, you brought us out here to die. God will not rescue us. Now, slightly understandable at that one. You can say, okay, there's a sea in front of you, an army behind you. I get why you're freaking out. 3 days later, they've crossed the Red Sea. God's opened the sea. They've walked through dry ground. God's poured the waters back on Pharaoh's army. They've triumphed. Miriam's written a worship song. The people of God are singing. 3 days later, after that moment, after seeing God's deliverance in ways that are just mind-blowing, in Exodus 15, 22 to 24, they grumbled against God that God wasn't faithful. 3 days. And so God has to have a conversation and deal with them. And he brings them to Elim, a place of bliss and blessedness, and Eden in the wilderness. There's trees and pools and a place to take a breath and to relax, to enjoy what freedom looks like. They have 6 weeks there and they're fed up. They're complaining again. We're not only free from slavery, we're not only in paradise, but you know what, God? You're tight, we have no meat to eat. We've got nothing we really enjoy out here. We've eaten all our supplies. And so Exodus 16, verse 3, God sends them manna and feeds them. Provision from heaven. Exodus 17, they grumble against God because now they've got food, they've got no water when they go for a walk. They didn't believe that God could do all these things and not meet their needs. And so, Exodus 17:7, God provides a miracle, water from the rock. And why? What was their complaint? Is the Lord not amongst us? Does he not care? Oh no, he's abandoned us. Does it look like a God who's abandoned a people up to this point? And we've not even got to Sinai yet. Sinai's like 3 weeks in, 3 months in after they got through leaving Egypt, like short periods of time. All this has gone wrong before they even get to Sinai. They've dealt with it. Moses is now out of sight. He's gone up the mountain to speak to the Lord on their behalf. He hasn't come back quick enough, so they've got all the gold they've got, and they're going to make an idol that represents the gods of Egypt that God has already destroyed several weeks previously. They bow down and worship it, preferring it over Yahweh, something they've created, something they can manipulate. God's anger burns against them. And then Korah rebels, and God breaks out against the camp and kills Korah and all those on his side. Is the promise that we've already read in Deuteronomy. I will come to you to your face. Doesn't mess around. Oh, and then Miriam and Aaron start grumbling against Moses, against his leadership, criticize his choice of spouse. Then Israel sent 12 spies into the land that God has promised them, a land that has all the bounty they could imagine. They were slaves not long ago, and now they're not content with bounty. And they, rather than say, if our God is for us, who can be against us? They say the giants are too big, the cities are too strong, and we can't take the land apart from the two, Joshua and Caleb. Our text tells us today in chapter 3 and verse 10 that Israel's hearts always go astray. Can you see why it was written? It's what was going on. The context is all that we've been talking about. Their hearts are bent from God. They would try and say and do the right thing when it was advantageous, when it suited them, but then when it was more preferable, they would soon change. Their hearts worshipped anything but Yahweh. Their faith was in comfort and convenience, not in God's faithfulness. The minute suffering came, God's not faithful. Comfort, convenience. Their hearts were hard to God. Verse 9 of our text, God says, you put me on the stand. You thought you were going to drag me into a court and prove me faithful or not. That's the audacity that you've had, O Israel. And therefore, God gave them, verse 11, what their hearts decided and their mouths spoke. A life without rest in God. They didn't want his ways, they just wanted his blessings and benefits. Does it not sound like a familiar story? Which is why verse 12 takes us with arrowed precision into the application. It causes us to look back when we go, I can't believe as we read our Old Testament, Israel behaved like that. I would never do that. And then we take a breath and we look in this process in the middle and we're like, Lord, help me.